In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. I wanted to take a few moments to talk about today, the Sunday of Orthodoxy, the first Sunday in Lent, and also the icons that we have in the tradition of our church. You know, iconography is something that's a different type of art from what's normally seen in museums and what people normally will adorn public buildings and even homes with. Iconography is, from hearing from someone who is an art major at the Art Institute, is really a different way, and according to the art teachers is the incorrect way of drawing a person. But according to the Byzantine Empire and according to the iconography and the style and the meaning behind the icons, it is the absolute appropriate way to write the spiritual dimension of the person or the scene that is depicted. You know, the icon up in the back here at the center part is the three angels, and you see the table, and the table does not have, in typical perspective, as you look away from something, it gets narrower. And if you look at that table, it's not narrower in the back. Sometimes it's actually wider in the back. Many times you'll see, even in the Last Supper icons, you'll see that the table, as you look at it, is widened as it goes out, which is against our perspective, right? From a normal art teacher or from someone studying anything about field of view or perspective would say, no, as it goes further away, it gets smaller. But why is this backwards for us? Is because the icon is coming to us. The people, the saints, the figures, and not all people in the iconography are saints, right? We have the icon of the resurrection. All those on Christ's left side are not saints, but they're still coming to us. They're still there. We're still a part. We're inside the icon by our presence, by our looking at them. And the iconography also has many things that typically, from a worldly perspective, would be considered wrong, right? We look at the mountains in the back. You'd say, well, those don't look like mountains. They look like little hooks, right? But if you read about the understanding of creation, that it bows down, that the mountains bow down to Christ. In the nativity icon, you see the ox and the donkey in the icon, peering over the Christ child. And you also have to look at the fact that the first reading from Isaiah and the first day of Lent on Clean Monday references the ox and the donkey, that they know who Christ is, but humanity does not. But we look at the iconography and we say, yes, it's different. And many times people will come into the church and they'll say, that it looks different. I don't quite get it. Why are the faces elongated? And we've talked about those things through the years, as far as the bulging foreheads to show wisdom, long fingers to show asceticism, long beards to show a monastic or a wilderness disposition, short beards many times to show the Byzantine Empire, like St. Constantine has on his side. And his icon on the left there with the cross in the middle with St. Helen. The short beards were a sign of the early Byzantine Empire. Then they became long, and they were short, and they're back and forth. So people have asked, why are the beards different lengths? Well, it depends on what time of history that the saint was in when those beards were at different lengths. But there's also saints that don't have beards, too. Not only the female saints are not depicted as all wrapped up, but there's St. Nikitas up there, who has the white shawl over him, who was killed during the Muslim invasion. He does not have facial hair either. There's other saints throughout history who were younger or just did not have, they came from a military background, who did not have beards. Someone like St. George is a typical example of that, too. He was a military man. They didn't have beards, but he's still a saint. So the icons give us many things behind the typical understanding, but they draw us in to help us focus in worship. And I think one of the best ways that they're identified is as a tool to help us focus, a tool to help us pray, a tool to help us remember, and also to understand the theology of the church. You know now, or hopefully you know this at this point, that anyone who had cross vestments, right, like St. Athanasius, anyone who wears cross vestments is a bishop. So you can look at any icon and you see that and you say, that person's a bishop. You have St. Eleftherios up there, who's a bishop. You have St. Basil right here with the long black beard, a bishop. You have Christ in the throne, who's dressed like a bishop, and he's got the black and white cross vestment. So you see that and you know instantaneously. St. Nectarios, what is he? He's a bishop. Even though he doesn't have a bishop's crown, he's a bishop, and he's dressed with the kalimafi with the veil, the hat with the veil on. The reason I'm bringing this up is so that you can see what the richness is that is found in the iconography. And you can also come to understand the torture that many went through, saints of the church, who were fighting for iconography, who actually became an icon themselves. And they became an icon, they became saints of the church because they were martyred for standing up for the icons. Now, yesterday was St. Theophylactos, who was a saint who went up against Leo the Armenian, who was an emperor who was against iconography. And St. Theophylact, as they call him in English, or St. Theophylactos, he also had a prophecy that Leo was going to be killed because of his ways, and he had that prophecy, and actually Leo was killed inside church on Christmas Eve, and he was killed by some of the followers of people, of a particular individual that Leo had a death sentence set out on. But St. Theophylactos was one of the saints. There's also other saints too. St. Ephthemios, who's commemorated on December 26th. St. Ephthemios is a saint who was a supporter of iconography, and what happened to him was he was beaten so bad that the writers of his life said that his body became like a giant wound, that he had no skin left on his body because he was beaten so bad. Now, if you think about it, you cut yourself or whatever, you put a Band-Aid on. If you have something really bad, obviously you're at the hospital, but if you've ever seen a burn victim and when their skin is missing, and then you think of this particular saint who, because he supported iconography, was stripped not only of his clothing, but his actual skin, and he died 8 days later from those wounds. Joseph of Thessalonica, who is July 14th, Michael of Synatha, who is May 23rd, Emilian, who is August 8th, and obviously St. Theophylactos, who is commemorated yesterday. Why is he commemorated yesterday? As I've said many times, because the church prepares us for the next day and links the two events together. Many of the saints of the church are connected, and we have St. Theophylactos yesterday as a reminder to us of today, and really to get the idea that when we proclaim the presence of the icons in church, that we are proclaiming not only the presence of God who comes to us and has directed us to these beautiful icons through the miracles, the many miracles that have been wrought through icons, but also is a reminder to us that we cannot have our icons and just put them in drawers. We can't just say, okay, well, I have one icon somewhere in the house, wherever it is. If you were to think about the presence of the holiness that it brings, we would have icons all over our homes. It's the same thing on the opposite side. If you had, just the negative things in your life and you put them up through your home, it really indicates what kind of household you have. But to ask God to come to your home in the presence of the icons and to show others too that this is an important part of our tradition and an important part of our lives. In your kitchen, you should have an icon of Saint Euphrosinos up there. And if you don't know about Saint Euphrosinos, you should read about him. There's also Saint Konon, C-O-N-O-N, who is a gardener. Those are two great saints for kitchens. What should you have at the front of your home? As you come into your home, you should have an icon of Christ and the Virgin Mary somewhere as you walk into your home. As I've told people throughout the many months and years now, as you come into your garage, and as you have your garage door, most people have attached garages. You come into your garage, and what do many people do? What's the first thing that you're greeted with when you come in from a garage, right? The mud room, right? It's the room where the mud is supposed to remain, right? So if you have dirty shoes or whatever, you leave them there, and then you go to the rest of your house. It's a catch-all, right? It's the worst floor in your home, right? It's probably maybe the dirtiest place of your home, right? Because your coats are in there, if they're wet or whatever, everything goes in there. And what's usually in there? Your washer and dryer, right? Because you take it off. I mean, the mental thing is you take it off, you throw it into the laundry right there. We do that with our clothing, we do that with our shoes, we do that with our boots and all these other things. But what do we do for our souls? Do we leave those things out? And what are we greeted with when we walk into our home? Do we have the stick of the day on us, or do we leave that behind? So what do I recommend? I recommend that you have an icon on your door in your garage. And you have an icon of Christ there, and that you say a prayer that the day washes off from you. That you go in and you walk into your home, and as you open that door from the garage and you had your awful day and your boss was yelling at you, or you just got cut off, or you just almost got hit by some student driver, or you almost ran over some homeless guy who jumped in the middle of the street. I don't know. Whatever your day is, that you're greeted with that icon. You venerate the icon, say a prayer, leave the day outside and walk in, just like you would do with anything. If you're outside cutting the grass, right, or you're pruning, or you're working in the garden, you don't come in with dirty hands and just start, making food. You go to the sink. You wash your hands at the sink. Hopefully you do, unless you have some ghetto restaurant somewhere that I don't know about and you're doing some nasty things. But you wash your hands and you wash off the dirt. Do the same thing with your soul as you walk in your home. In your bedrooms, you should have an icon. You should have your patron saint. You should have a guardian angel in your room. You should have Christ and the Virgin Mary again in your room. Children. All right, I understand that, there's people that like Justin Bieber. There's people that don't like Justin Bieber, right? There's the two groups. And people have posters up, and they have this person, or they have, Taylor Swift up, or they have, whatever their posters are in their rooms. Okay, whatever. But what I tell people is, if you're going to have a poster in your room, make sure that you have an icon bigger than whatever secular person you have in your room. So if you have a big thing of, whatever, I don't even know who's famous in basketball or whatever, you have a big one like this, then I can guide you how to get an icon like this of your patron saint to put in there to offset your room, so it's balanced, right? But really, we have to say, what are the icons that we put up? What are the icons that we worship? And when we let our kids do that sometimes, then we say, well, what is the more important thing in their life? Is it this? Is it, like I said, I don't know anybody. Who's, some famous person? Pele, right? Pele? Is he still alive? I don't even know. You have somebody up, and then you have your icon is a little, thing like this that your nana gave you that was stuck to, whatever your gift was or whatever. You got it sitting like in your drawer, and then when your friends come over, you pull the drawer, slide it in, slide it closed, and you're like, oh, okay, well, we're good to go. Well, no. And then what happens is kids have bad dreams, they get dissuaded, they get taken away, and then what happens? Then the parents come to me and say, I don't know, my kids, they're not doing this, they're not doing. Do you have an icon in the room? No, we have an icon in the somewhere and it's lost. It gets lost. So what should you have by your bed? You should have an icon of the guardian angel. You should have an icon of your patron saint, Christ and the Virgin Mary. You can do one where they're together or separate or whatever. That should be there too. In your dining room, what should you have? Everybody has the Last Supper, right? They should have some Last Supper somewhere. Some type, whether it's in your kitchen or your dining room, you should have a Last Supper in your home. So what am I saying? I'm saying that there's icons that speak to us. Even the hospitality of Abraham is another good one. The Holy Trinity that's at the very top is another good one to have in your living room or your dining room or your kitchen as a sign that you welcome God in. And if you think about it, when we read the story of Zacchaeus and Christ says, "Come down, and I'm going to stay at your house today." What is that? It's the institution of two things. The institution of the house blessing, right, where Christ comes into the home and blesses the home. But it's also the Word of God coming into the home and changing it. So with iconography, we ask God to come into our homes and to change them. And there's a lot of things that I tell people over and over. If you have problems with what you're watching on a computer, put an icon of the Virgin Mary next to your computer screen or on your computer screen, and let's see what you do. And the same thing with some of you with the programs you might watch on HBO and all the other vlakias that are on television. Put an icon on there, or put Christ on the cross next to your TV, and you'll think twice about if you're watching, Goodfellas or whatever kind of torturous things on television. You'd say, okay, well, what am I doing here? It's the same thing with us too. There's nothing wrong with keeping an icon in your pocket. There's nothing wrong with that. I keep icons on me all the time. And I recommend that people keep an icon on them. Keep your guardian angel. If you're at a place where you feel like you need to pray and you have that opportunity, pull it out. Just wherever. And if it's private, it's private. But you have it with you. And your cross, too, is another thing. If you have a cross that's from your baptism and it's a nice cross, and you say, I don't know, I don't want my kids to wear it because I'm afraid they're going to lose it, right? How many times have I heard that? I don't have them wear it because what if they lose it? If they lose it, then you talk to St. Fanurios right over there and you say, we lost the cross. And then what does St. Fanurios do? He supplicates God, and many times people find whatever they've lost from St. Fanurios. And what does St. Fanurios ask us to do after we find something? Fanuropita, he's something even beyond that, better than that. What he says, pray for my mother, because his mother was a very terrible woman according to his life, and he wants everyone that when he does a miracle for you to pray for his mother so that his mother will be saved. We don't know her name, we just know that it's his mother. So if you find something, say, God bless St. Fanurios' mother and welcome her into the kingdom of heaven. These are things that we have to understand. The mentality of our cross and of our icons cannot be the mentality of your fine china and your crystal, right? You have to have somebody very special, most people, you have to have somebody very special over before you're going to pull out your nice crystal, right? The $30 glass, and you're like, ooh, I don't know, hopefully they won't break it, or I'll bring out the china and all these things. And we're saving these things for what? Right? How many people have silverware and it's brown because you never use it? And it can't be like that with our crosses. It can't be like that with our icons. It can't be like that with our if we have incense in our home or whatever. It has to be something that we use. And iconography is something that we use, and we should be using every single day in our prayers, in our outreach to God, in our homes. And do not be ashamed. Do not be scarce or cheap, is the other word, on what you put in your home as far as iconography. Get some nice icons to adorn your home. And not to adorn them as far as beauty and to say, oh, look at this beautiful icon. This was hand-painted by, Tsar Nicholas's first cousin in the Russian. No, it's not about that. It's about having an icon that you look at, that you connect with, that you look at it and you say, I feel something when I see this icon. There's some icons that you may see that you look at and you say, that's a beautiful icon. There's also, unfortunately, some icons that are not beautiful as far as I'm concerned. There's some amateur work that's done where you look at it and you're like, that's not good. It's not a good focus. And if I'm looking at an icon trying to pray, I want to have that beauty that comes from the trained iconographer that comes through and is a window for me to look in. And sometimes there's a lot of dirty windows. And sometimes there's beautiful windows where you see everything, the big picture windows. And that's really what we're trying to do with the church and what we should be doing in our homes too. Now, as we go through, today is the last day that we're going to be asking that you should have gotten a sheet as you came into church. Were they handing them out in the back of the icon list? Lou? Yes? No? Yes? Okay. Those are some of the icons that have not the Confession of Faith. It should have pictures on it, right? Icons. Those are some. Yes, that's good. All right. I was happy that it wasn't 150 copies made that are holding a table from flipping. Today's going to be the last day that we're going to, or that I will accept if you would like to donate one icon for the church. We're going to put a bottom row in the church. Those are some of the icons that we do not have. Today is the feast day of the 40 martyrs of Sevastia. We have their relics inside the church, inside the altar table. Okay, and we also have a small reliquary box. We don't have their icon in the church, which is something that we need to do as well. So that's on the list. St. Mary Magdalene holding the red egg. That's another saint, equal to the apostles, St. Mary Magdalene, right? There's a lot of saints there that if you're interested in donating, today is the last day. Sunday of Orthodoxy, it's the day of icons, so this is the day to do that. Like I said, they're $400 for the icons. That's all the shipping costs and installation and everything. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. But the important thing too is, as you leave today, if you don't have an icon, and I know Terry's probably shaking in the back from the bookstore, if you don't have an icon of a guardian angel in your kids' rooms, you should have had one. If your child was born here in this church, at the 40 days, you should have the little one that I gave you, right? That was from the Philoptikos that I gave you at the 40-day blessing. Think of those icons. St. Euphrosinos in your kitchen, the Last Supper, even some of the patron saints that the relics are here in the church. And some of the saints, too, that we look to for certain help and assistance. St. Boniface in the back. I know we have his icon in the bookstore. He's a patron saint for abuse problems. So if you have an abuse problem, whether it's alcohol, drug, gambling, whatever, he's the saint you should be praying to. You should have him in your home. And there's so many saints that have different help and assistance in many ways. So on this day, when we hold up our icons, and hopefully you brought your icons today, as we hold them up at the service at the end, I want you to think about the fact that we hold them up and we stand in church and nobody's going to bother us, right? Nobody's going to come in and ransack us. Nobody's going to scourge us. Nobody's going to Iron Maiden us. We hold them up and we read that. But as you read that today, I want you to think about the fact that there's saints in our church that we commemorate who died because they did what? Because they held up an icon. Because they venerated the icons. And as one of the icons that I was, when I was in California, not this past trip with the parish council, but a trip before that, there's an icon in Hawaii in a Russian church. It's an icon of the Virgin Mary. You can look it up, the Virgin Mary of Hawaii icon. It's about this big. And it's a replica icon. It's not even hand painted. It was from a replica of a Russian original. And that icon is continually weeping. And it goes throughout the country, too. There's a deacon that takes it from place to place. And I was visiting with a priest out in California, and his presbytera, we were talking about different things, and his presbytera said, yeah, the deacon who came stayed at our home, and he brought the icon to our home. And she said, he put it by the front door of the house. They had a stand there, and he put it by the front door. And she said, as we walked past the front of the door of the house, we could barely, what'd she say? It was almost overwhelming, the smell of roses that was coming from that icon. And now I do have some of that oil from that icon, and just a tiny little vial that I have, and she had like a little cotton swab, and it was in, like those little bags that Kufeta come in, where they're like mesh bags, whatever they are. She had it in there, and she brought it over, and as she was walking to me to smell it, I could smell it preceding her, and it was so overwhelming. And that icon has been known for healing people. It's a beautiful icon that's here in America. It's in the United States, and it travels around, and you can see where it is at different points in time. It's usually in the Russian church. It travels in different Russian churches, but that's just one icon. The icon of the Virgin Mary in Malawi, which was another icon that continues to flow myrrh, miraculous myrrh that heals people. They say when it first started, people were driving in the streets. Now, it was Greece, okay? So you wrap your head around the roads of Greece. It's not like Fifth Avenue and the monastery is right next to the street like we have here, right? It's up in the hills, the monastery. But as people were driving, they could smell the fragrance from that icon that was inside this monastery. And it was coming through the glass, because it was in glass encased, and it was coming through the glass and coming out. And that oil that was coming, that myrrh that was coming from that icon, has healed numerous people throughout the world. And if you go, and I know we have one group of parishioners here that just went to Greece, and they're going to that monastery, and they said, we're going to go see the Malawi icon. We're going to be there, and I said, well, that's, what a blessing that is, and that's a thing that hopefully we will all see. Now, why am I saying this? Is because in Pittsburgh a few years ago, they had a summer camp. The kids made little icons, little tiny icons, they decoupaged icons. They put them on wood in their little camp, little kids camp. And the next day, all the icons were weeping, all of them. They were all flowing myrrh, and they had no idea what the sign was or whatever, but all these icons that were handmade were flowing myrrh. So what more? We need to welcome that into our home. We need to welcome that into our church and into our hearts to help us pray, to help us focus, and to stay directed so that we can continue to hold our icons up with pride. We can hold them up with joy, and also to become closer to God in learning who they are, what they did, and what they do and will continue to do for us. Amen.